Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Madam Chair of the Democratic Committee, Brandy White.
Hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. Thank you guys so much for being here this evening. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Brandy White, and I am the chair of the DeKalb County Democrats. Thank you all so much for being here with us this evening. You can't see all of yourselves out there, but I want you to give yourselves a big round of applause for coming out and hanging out with us tonight. All right, so tonight we have a number of you here in the room with us. We also have folks that are online listening to this. I first want to start off by saying, again, thank you for being here, but also thank you to our events team led by Steve Parker. Steve is constantly putting on wonderful events for us, and tonight is going to be both educational and informative for us to learn a little bit more about Project 2025 and the effects that that is having here in the state of Georgia. But not only that, but also what we can do about it, how you can get involved, how you can help to stop all of this mess that Republicans are trying to attack on our freedoms, both here in the state of Georgia as well as across the nation. So thank you for being here this evening, and we are looking forward to getting started. I'm about to introduce our moderator for this evening, someone that is very dear to us, our first vice chair, Amy Swigert. So Amy, come on up. Everyone give her a big round of applause. Our panelists here for this evening. Again, looking forward to spending some time with you. If you have any questions throughout the evening, we'll have some live questions at the end. Thank you guys so much for being here.
Thank you, Randy, and thank you all. Can y'all hear me okay? Okay, good. So thank you all for your interest in this topic, and thank you to our online audience for their interest as well. We will actually have questions throughout the presentation, and we'll let you know when we're open for questions. So we have got a jam-packed agenda for y'all tonight. So what's going to happen is I'm going to give you some background on Project 2025, and at the end of that presentation, you are going to be sitting there saying, this is insane. This can't be true. I don't believe this will happen. And that's probably what your friends are going to say too when you bring up the subject of Project 2025. It sounds like a bunch of liberal hysteria. Well, I'm here to tell you that it is already happening. And it is already happening in the state of Georgia. And so we're going to bring up a couple of our state legislators who have been fighting these battles against these Project 2025 policies for a long time. And we'll tell you how this is affecting Georgia. And then we're going to hear from a younger person, someone of a younger generation, a student from Emory University, who's going to talk about how he views Project 2025. What does it mean for the next generation? And what does it mean for him personally and his family? So that will give us a really good perspective. And then we're going to have somebody from the Harris Waltz campaign, our lead organizing director in DeKalb, come and talk to us about how we can talk with our friends and family about Project 2025 and about Vice President Harris and Governor Walz and what they will do as an alternate for Project 2025. And she's also going to tell you how to get plugged into their campaign as well. So with that, I'm going to start with our presentation. You can go to the next slide, please. So this campaign, the contrast could not be clearer, right? We've got Kamala Harris and we've got Donald Trump. We've got future, we've got past. we've got freedom, and we've got fascism. And that is a very clear contrast. And I don't know about you, but I choose the blue side. I choose the happy side. I choose the optimistic side. I choose the side where we are free to do what we want and live our lives the way we think we should live. But tonight, we're going to focus more on the red side. And we're going to tell you where Donald Trump and the Republican Party want to take us back to. So next slide, please. So here's a little background on Project 2025. And I am not a Project 2025 scholar. I am not an expert. I'm just somebody who's done a bunch of research on this and then have watched a bunch of training videos. But here's what I learned about Project 2025. It is a 922-page conservative plan, and you probably have all already heard this, to give Donald Trump more power over our lives, to throw out our checks and balances in our government, and to consolidate power under Donald Trump's Oval Office. No biggie. Let's learn some more. So, this is the conservative website for Project 2025, and this is what it says in the intro. It is not enough for conservatives to win elections. If we are going to rescue the country from the radical left, we need both a governing agenda and the right people in place. Sorry, I'm having trouble reading it. Ready to carry out the agenda on day one of the next conservative administration. That's what it says in its intro. Next slide. So, Project 2025 is spearheaded by an organization called the Heritage Foundation. And the Heritage Foundation has been around a long time. It's been around since at least the 60s. And it has always been a mainstream Republican think tank. And it is ready to, and it also has about 100 conservative organizations working alongside it to not only create this plan, but to institute it on day one. Next slide. One more. So, I said that the Heritage Foundation used to be a mainstream Republican think tank, but it's gotten more extreme in the last few years. And that's because it has a relatively new president. His name is Kevin Roberts, and he comes from a conservative think tank based in Texas, and he's been a history professor. But Kevin Roberts is someone who's a fan of Viktor Orban, who is the Hungarian autocrat who basically took Hungary's democracy and turned it into an autocracy. And Viktor Orban's been the prime minister for the last 14 years. And you can see, no matter what Donald Trump says, here he is flying on a private airplane with Kevin Roberts on his way to the Heritage Foundation to give a keynote speech. So yeah, he doesn't know anything about Project 2025. He doesn't know who's behind it. He doesn't know any of those people. We know how true that is. And then you've got J.D. Vance right there with Kevin Roberts. And J.D. Vance has written a foreword to Kevin Roberts' upcoming book, which he claims is not about Project 2025, but you can bet it is going to espouse all the same things that we see in Project 2025. And interestingly enough, that book was supposed to be published during this election cycle, and they have pushed it off until after the election, because Project 2025 has gotten so unpopular. Next slide. So the Heritage Foundation is quite well funded. They've got $500 million in the bank, at least. And they have about 500,000 members. They've got a lobbying arm that is hard at work in Washington, D.C., making relationships with our lawmakers. They are already training people to become staffers on the Hill. They are a very busy organization, and they are already very well established in Washington, D.C. Next slide. So the plan has 4 pillars, and the first pillar is a playbook, and it's basically a remake of the federal government. It is taking independent agencies and making them not so independent, making them more accountable to the President of the United States, so that he can have control over things like the Justice Department, the FBI, the FDA, the EPA, so that those agencies will serve his agenda instead of an independent agenda to serve the country. It's got a whole HR plan. It's got, they are working on, and they already have this underway, they've already trained some folks as part of this plan. They have a database of people specially picked, hand-picked, to be Donald Trump loyalists that they can then train and place into the federal government. And that training is already out there. In fact, ProPublica released hours of training videos for Project 2025. And it is full of former Trump administration officials conducting these trainings. And we know that at least 140 former Trump officials have contributed to the writing of Project 2025. And by the way, his name appears more than 300 times in Project 2025. And to be fair, Joe Biden's name also appears in Project 2025. So no matter how much Donald Trump tries to distance himself from Project 2025, it is still very clear. This is called Project 2025. This is for his administration. The other part of this is obviously there's a lot of policy, and we're going to dive into some of that policy in a minute, but it is expansive, it is extensive, and it is scary. So let's move ahead. So no matter how much Donald Trump tries to distance himself, he is part and parcel of Project 2025. It is meant for him. And Governor Walz, in his rally in Nebraska, made a great point. And he said, when he tries to play dumb about Project 2025, I coached basketball for enough years to know that if somebody takes the time to draw up a playbook, they plan to use it. Next slide. So here's some of the policy things, and I'm really gonna load through this because it's a lot, and I'm just giving you the highlights tonight. So one thing, landing on reproductive rights, one thing you might be surprised by is that there actually is not a federal ban on abortion in Project 2025, or at least it doesn't say those words. But be clear that that is what is in it. So this whole idea of fetal personhood, which is this idea that has become popular in the Republican circles, that the minute that a sperm meets an egg, and that egg gets fertilized and it becomes an embryo, that embryo now should have all the rights of a fully formed human. And so that means that you cannot, obviously, murder an embryo. You cannot take away the rights of an embryo, just like you can do any of those things for a person. And so that's your federal abortion ban right there. And that's how they also will limit abortion medication. Abortion medication is often used in about 40% of abortions. It's safe, it's effective. Project 2025 wipes that off the table. Similar things like contraceptives, like the day after pill, those would not qualify anymore because it takes away the rights of life for an embryo. You've got abortion surveillance. This is one of my real favorites. So they want all the states to monitor women who have had miscarriages and report that back to the federal government, because we don't want any woman to have a quote-unquote miscarriage because maybe it's really an abortion. Talk about a deep state. Republicans love to talk about the deep state. I don't know. If this is not deep state, I don't know what is. You've got this idea of ending abortion tourism, which is a horrible term. It's like you're going to go to another state to get an abortion and then you're going to do some sightseeing, right? That's not what happens. And they want to make it difficult, if not impossible, for women who are looking for abortions to go somewhere else to get an abortion. It wants to end, limit IVF and birth control. Let's move on to another topic. Healthcare. They want to end the Affordable Care Act. Donald Trump tried to do it in his first term. There's no doubt he's going to do that in his second term. And that takes us back to the days where you've got insurance companies rejecting people for pre-existing conditions. I don't know about you, but I'm a 2-time cancer survivor. I got into politics because of the Affordable Care Act. I wanted to make sure everybody had the protections that the Affordable Care Act affords us. This is where Donald Trump wants to take us back. They favor the insurance companies over patients. They want to privatize Medicare and Medicaid. They want to eliminate President Biden's drug negotiation program. So bye-bye $35 cap on insulin and the reduced drug prices on the 10 drugs that they just this week announced. Say goodbye to that. They want to make it easier for Big Pharma to control prices versus the federal government negotiating on our behalf. They want to restrict the size and scope of Medicaid. And this is a point I want to make, not just about Medicaid, but about Social Security and Medicare. They will say things like, Donald Trump will save Social Security, or Donald Trump will save Medicaid. And I actually got a flyer that said that. Donald Trump will save Social Security. Well, the way that they will save it is to limit the number of people that will access it. And they will limit the types of benefits that you will get. So for Social Security, for example, they want to raise the age at which you can claim Social Security. So you might have to work till you're 70 to get Social Security. That's how they're going to save it. So let's not be fooled by their rhetoric. And they want to put millions of people on Medicare Advantage as the default. And Medicare Advantage is a much more controlled version of Medicare. And my dad complains about Medicare Advantage all the time. He does not want to go on Medicare Advantage. It is much more limiting. It is much more cumbersome. He doesn't want to have anything to do with it. That would be the default for Americans under Project 2025. So let's move on. Education. Eliminate the Department of Education. Top of the list. What do we need that for? Here's my favorite. Eliminate Head Start. Head Start. If y'all don't know, Head Start serves hundreds of thousands of students every year. And it not only provides education, preschool, pre-K, it provides health services like immunizations and checkups and things like that. It supports parents in their parenthood journey. It is really about giving kids and parents a head start into life. And that is so critical for our society. Too many kids can't read, and that's because they don't get these early services and early interventions where there are people reading to them and engaging with them. This is so critical. I cannot believe that this is on their list to eliminate. You've got ending Title I funding for schools with low-income students. That is a travesty. We in Georgia don't have, as part of our formula, any kind of equalization for our low-income schools. We get it through this Title I funding, and if we don't have that, we're really in trouble for our schools. Ending civil rights protections for kids, LGBTQ kids, and other kids that are protected under federal civil rights regulations. Eliminate funding for students with disabilities. Something I know is near and dear to my state senator's heart, who we'll bring up in just a minute. And promote this private school choice program. This is the choice of term for vouchers, and we're seeing this all over the country. But it is a way to funnel public funds into private schools and religious schools. Next topic. LGBTQ rights. Like I said before, eliminating regulations that protect our LGBTQ friends and family. Defining families. The federal government, under Project 2025, would tell all of us what constitutes a family, and there's only one option, and that is a man married to a woman who has children. It does not include same-sex couples. It does not include single mothers. It does not include anyone other than what they consider a quote-unquote traditional marriage. Let's see. Reinstating the transgender ban in the military. No oldie but a goodie. We know Trump already did it in his first term. He's going to bring it right back again, right? Same old playbook. Next slide, please. Climate change. So basically, they want to do away with all climate change regulations. They want to pull us out of all of our agreements with international organizations, the UN framework for climate change, the Paris Climate Agreement. And here's one that is actually not on the screen, but I'm going to tell you about it anyway. They want to eliminate sorry, I wrote it down, the national, sorry y'all, I got my slides out of whack. It's the national, now I can't find it. Oh, I got it. The National Oceanic, because I wasn't going to remember this term. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. That is the federal agency that does really sinister things like predict weather and tell us when storms are coming. And the reason that the folks at Project 2025 and the Heritage Foundation don't like this is because they claim that this is where climate alarmists, that's where they all are. Climate change scientists, they're called climate alarmists in Project 2025, and they want to eliminate it. Let's go to the next slide. Workers' rights. Y'all, there are lots and lots of rules about overtime that favor employers over workers. So they're going to make you work more hours to get overtime pay. They're going to allow employers to pay over a number of weeks instead of on a weekly basis. There are lots of these rules that favor employers over workers. They're going to weaken our unions and maybe even eliminate some of our public unions, like the teachers union that my mother is a part of. And they're also going to allow and make it easier for businesses to reclassify their workers. So they're going to allow them to reclassify them from full-time employees to independent contractors, which takes away all kinds of benefits and other protections for workers. Now, these are just, y'all, this is just highlights under each of these categories. So it goes much, much deeper than what I'm telling you, and I'm just giving you a flavor of what all of this is. Go to the next slide, please. The list goes on. So you've got eliminating all DEI efforts. They don't like diversity. They're going to eliminate all of those types of programs where they can. They're going to eliminate words that have to do with diversity. They're going to eliminate the quote-unquote woke agenda. Immigration, they're going to round up as many immigrants as they possibly can, and they don't care where they have to do it. They're going to send ICE to hospitals, to playgrounds, to churches, to schools. They're going to get aggressive about it. Veterans, they're going to dismantle the VA. Just passed the VA here on Claremont Road. It's going to be gone. And they're going to limit benefits for our veterans. Taxes. Of course, you got to address taxes. They're going to slash the corporate tax rate, and they're going to raise taxes for the rest of us because they're going to put tariffs on imports, which is going to raise consumer prices for all of us. So this is just a smattering of what's in Project 2025 and the policy agenda. So this is the point where you say, this is insane. This is crazy. This is making my head hurt. And you would be right. So with that, I'm going to bring up a couple of friends from our state legislature. Can you slide, please? Yes. So this is the time where we're going to have our panel discussion. I'm going to call up a couple of our state legislators. We've got Representative, can you flip to the next slide? We've got Representative Mary Margaret Oliver, and we've got State Senator Carroll. Please help them Okay, and I just want to let y'all know, so aside from being the first vice chair of the DeKalb Democrats, I also work with this lady, my state senator, down at the Capitol. So I have had a front row view to what we're about to discuss about what's happening in Georgia. And I have watched both of these ladies and their Democratic caucuses fight these fights for quite a while now. So Representative Oliver, why don't you just introduce yourself and talk about your district, which we're sitting in right at the moment.
We are sitting in House District 82. Welcome. Thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you, Brenda Catkins, for doing this. Most of you know how much trouble this is to do an event like this, and Steve Parker's done a great job. I hope we use your time well, as your time is valuable. I've had a long political career. I've served in both the House and the Senate. After going to the House first, I moved over to the Senate. I have always worked on the square of Decatur, but I worked with Pierre Howard's law firm for a period. So I went over to the Senate and he was Lieutenant Governor. I ran for Lieutenant Governor and lost. Whoops. But I was out a bunch of years and I came back to the House. Oddly enough, Speaker David Ralston, who died just almost 2 years ago, he had the exact same pattern. He started in the Senate. He ran for statewide office. We both lost the same day. We both went back to our offices and we both came back to the House where he became Speaker and I became, in the second half of my career, a member of the minority party. I had been, when the Democrats were in charge, the first half of my career, I was chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee and I was chair of the House Judiciary Committee, which is kind of odd, little factoid. When the Democrats were in charge and I was chair of the Judiciary Committees that all of abortion legislation in the Senate, I recognize the power of the chair to make decisions solely myself as to whether or not a bill, an anti-abortion bill, would be allowed on the agenda. I could control that as a chair, and in the world of the Republican leadership, they control that. In the years that I was chair of the Judiciary Committee in the House or the Senate, I never put an abortion bill on the agenda, never.
Hi, good evening. I'm State Senator Sally Carroll, and I serve in State Senate District 40, which is mostly north DeKalb County. I live in unincorporated DeKalb County around Lakeside High School, but think some of your cities like Brookhaven and Dunwoody and Chamblee and Doraville in North DeKalb, and then the district does go out into Gwinnett County as well, incorporating much of the city of Peachtree Corners. I'm finishing my third term in the Senate, first ran in 2018 and flipped the last remaining Republican Senate district in the DeKalb County delegation. Who was called the Forever Senator, Senator Pappy home. What's unusual about tonight is we have two legislators who have served both under Democratic control and Republican control. I also served in the House from 1999 to 2005 when Roy Barnes was governor, and then saw the change when Georgia elected our first Republican governor. I had the fortune of having two babies when I was in the House, and so I was actually the first woman to ever dare have children while serving in the legislature. The Senate has been an interesting experience because all the extremists seem to be in the Senate right now. I was told when I was being recruited to run that the Senate was the more bipartisan collegial chamber. Maybe it was when you were there, but it's not anymore. So I'm going to have some colorful stories to tell you tonight.
Thank you. So I'm going to start the questions with Representative Oliver. Obviously, as I spoke about earlier, abortion is one of the big tenets of Project 2025, and it wants to take us back to the dark ages before women had control over their bodies, but we're already there in Georgia. We have one of the most extreme abortion bans in the country. Can you tell us about that and tell us about how it's impacting women today?
Thank you for focusing on that very important issue. The history of abortion legislation and litigation is something that's been a part of my career the entire time. I'm glad, Amy, that you mentioned in the beginning, people will think we're hysterical talking about Project 2025, it's never going to happen. I will tell you that one of the things I have to understand, and I choose to participate in the Georgia's political world, is that I have to deal with uncertainty. I know that what I believed prior to President Trump's appointments to the United States Supreme Court was that Roe v. Wade would not be overturned. I said that as a lawyer who had done reproductive litigation in my career. I said to myself, they will not overturn Roe v. Wade, and that all the politicalization and use of abortion legislation was for political opportunism. It wasn't for real change. I was wrong about that. I was painfully wrong about that. And it was a good lesson to me to know that some of the things they want to do in Project 2025 are things that they truly believe. Now, it's always true that they're just political opportunists that are using an issue to interest you, to raise money, to scare you. But it's also always true that there are people in the room who believe what's happening. 481 passed on one vote, went to the Senate, and I blame the Senate. Senator, I just won't mention his name, who's not a respected intellect or not a respected political operator, suddenly took control of the bill that came over from the House that wasn't supposed to pass, and manipulated based on weak opposition or no opposition to a very, very bad 6-week abortion ban. The United States Supreme Court is going to be revisiting all of these things, but we are in bad position right now in terms of the United States Supreme Court's interest in reproductive freedom or its interest in rights, privacy. It's interesting that Georgia's constitutional right, privacy, is stronger and has a different kind of litigation history. So there's a tiny bit of hope that our state constitution will save us from this debacle and save lives. But I am very discouraged right now about the reality of what we're facing, and 2025 represents a reasonable fear, I think.
So, one of the things that we heard, if you've been watching the Democratic National Convention, they have been highlighting this issue, and there was a really brave woman who spoke a couple of days ago. Her name was Hadley Duvall, and she talked about her situation where when she was a kid, she was raped by her stepfather, and she became pregnant. And at that time, she had options, but if she were in Georgia, she would have an option, but there's a caveat. So Representative Oliver, isn't it true that yes, Georgia has an exception for rape and incest, but tell us about the caveat.
I don't think I can explain the caveat to you. I
Well-
don't think that I understand the caveat, but I will say this, that in early part of my career, I was in my 20s in legal services doing all kinds of cases that I was not likely to win, but I learned to have a respect for the court system, which I still have. However, the politicalization of the federal court system through the Federalist Society makes me far less confident than I was as a 25-year-old lawyer. That's a bad trajectory.
And the caveat I was referring to was the fact that girls in that situation have to file a police report before they get an abortion. Isn't that true?
That is true. And it's also true, as I've counseled people on sexual assault cases, about what that means to their life if they're going to file a police report or file a lawsuit. That's a deeply personal matter. You know, another thing about this caveats and exceptions is there are judges out there, and I know this, who truly don't believe that 12-year-olds get pregnant. They just don't believe that happens. And convincing them of the reality of some people's lives is part of why this document, 900-page document, is so frightening.
So, Senator Harrell, not only do we have these abortion bans, but Republicans have attempted to limit or ban abortion medication in Georgia too. Isn't that right?
That's right, of course, that happens in the public Senate. I might add too that the Georgia's abortion ban, House Bill 481, also did add, maybe the Senate added, was the personhood clause where the
Senate did that.
The Senate did that, right. So that's there as well. I'll tell you a brief story, and then I'll talk to you about the abortion pill bill. There was one day last session when the governor's office, they had lost the Rivian contract, and that was something they were very proud of. And one of my colleagues went to the well and really kind of shamed them and pushed their buttons, and they got really mad. And a Republican in the Senate that I actually have some respect for stood up there and said, well, we wouldn't have these economic problems if all those women hadn't aborted those babies. He said it. His button got pushed, and he said it. So when you say this is what they really believe in, I believe that is true. Even some of the Republicans that seem kind of moderate. So the bill that I'm going to talk about, the abortion pill bill, is something you probably didn't hear as much about. part of the reason for that is because it happened in 2022 in the midst of the pandemic. But right now, you can pick up the phone and talk to a doctor or somebody who's working for a doctor and get within 24 hours the abortion pill prescribed. And as Amy mentioned earlier, 40%, I've even heard higher numbers than that, at least half the abortions now are medically induced rather than surgical procedures. So this affects a lot of people. So what the bill in 2022 would have done is required an in-person visit and an ultrasound prior to being given a prescription. Remind you, this was during the pandemic. It also banned abortion pills from being able to be distributed at universities. They presented this all in terms of protecting women and women's safety because these pills are so dangerous and all. But all of the major medical associations said that there was no clear benefit to the patient with this legislation. So that didn't pass. It didn't pass the House, thank you, House. But it was discussed and it will come back.
Thank you. Moving on to a different subject, because there's lots of subjects we could be covering right here. Representative Oliver, the idea of funneling public money into private and religious schools is not new in Georgia. And unfortunately, just this year, lost the fight against school vouchers. Tell us about that and about what school vouchers will mean for Georgia now.
That was another very, very painful loss. And what is painful, again, back to do they believe it or is it just political opportunism? The number of, I was with Governor Deal and on his book tour for his children's book, an event, and he talked about the influence that his mother, as a first grade teacher, had on him, the importance of reading. Many members of the Georgia General Assembly come from first grade teacher families. They come from rural first grade teacher schools. David Perdue, a name from our past, thankfully it's not our past. My father was superintendent of schools in Preston County. And despite that public school heritage and benefit, they voted for the private school voucher bill because Jan Jones in northern Fulton County has been campaigning relentlessly for a decade. It's going to send $250 million, that's what we know now, to private schools. It is not only a loss for money for the taxpayers to private schools that there'll be no oversight, there'll be no real testing, there'll be no real evaluations because the statute protects them from those kind of things. It's such a loss to the public school history that is essential to Georgia's growth. I am very interested, obviously, in every election, but the extent to which Governor Kemp puts all his political marbles, his interest, his focus into business development and jobs and Rivian and Hyundai, he's done an exceptionally, unusually strong leadership in that. He cares about not the things I care about or you might care about, but he cares about that. Those businesses need, and this is what they say when they come in the door, we need a workforce. And this bill of private school vouchers is weakening our opportunity, and that's why I can't understand why the business community is so absent in this bill.
That's a great point. Senator Harrell, an issue that is very personal to you is LGBTQ rights and specifically the attack on transgender youth. We've had a lot of battles on that recently. Tell us about that.
Yes, these bills go back to around 2021, and I have been very outspoken on this issue. The anti-trans bills mostly focus on sports and treatment. The sports bill came up in 2021, and the thing that upset me about this bill was that we're talking about elementary school kids and high school kids. We're not talking about Olympic athletes. We're talking about K through 12 education. And the thing that really upset me about this bill was we asked questions about, have there been any documented problems in your communities? And the only answer the author of the legislation could come up with for me was, well, we did have one kid who called me and said, or the parent called me and said that if any of those kids joined her such and such team, she would quit. And that's what he was basing this legislation on, which made me feel like they were using these kids as political footballs, and I wasn't going to have it. So I went to the well and told the story about my own child to try to humanize the issue. And I've tried to do that ever since. It's in terms of the bills that have to do with treatment, it's okay to have discussions, as many countries in Europe are having, about whether our process of assessment and treatment is strong and whether it needs to be revamped. This is kind of a new issue with young people. But what our country is doing is they are banning treatment completely. They're not doing that in Europe. So that tells me that there's a strong component of the Republican Party who just doesn't want these people to exist, or they would have a deeper conversation than just passing plain old payments.
May I follow up, Ms. please? On day 40, this is just a little story about our lives down there. On day 40, the House had refused to pass the ridiculous ban bill. 3 different times on Sunday night, up until 10:30 p.m., the Senate was sending over a new draft, a new draft, a new draft. There are people who believe this, what I still believe is mostly political opportunism, but it to be mean. How can you stand up and point your finger at somebody else's child and say she runs funny and I don't like her? I mean, how can you do that in our society? But they are so committed to this, some of them, that it's really kind of different environment than any I've experienced in my own political career. They were not going to give up, and to his credit, John Burns, the Speaker of the House, was allowed to come for a vote.
Senator Harrell, along those same lines, a lot of Project 2025 is about remaking America into a Christian nation and pushing this idea of Christian nationalism. And I mentioned earlier that there is a part of Project 2025 that, well, actually, I'm not sure I mentioned it, but there is a part of 2025 that would allow the federal government to give grants to organizations that discriminate against same-sex marriages. So essentially, they would send our tax dollars to organizations that discriminate. And we've seen similar attempts here in Georgia. Tell us about that.
So there's a fairly long history of these religious freedom bills. If you want to go back in time with me a little bit, remember about 8 years ago, this was a big topic in the Georgia legislature. It was before I was elected, but Georgia was considering passing one of these religious freedom bills. But the state of Indiana, my home state, beat them to this. And Indiana really got slapped down really, really hard. And in fact, their governor, who was Mike Pence, he was like, his career was destroyed over it. Because corporations were against this legislation in a very, very strong way. And so Georgia looked at what happened to Indiana and Mike Pence and decided, maybe we shouldn't do this. That was 8 years ago. It stayed pretty quiet, but it came back up. It reared its ugly head again last session in the Senate. It didn't pass because the House didn't pass it. But there's the issues of discrimination, but what's scarier to me is the arguments coming from the ACLU were that the bill didn't have a clause in it that prevents the government from establishing a religion. That was nowhere to be found in the legislation. And to me, that's really, really scary.
In the RFRA political debate, the business community did stand up, and that made a huge difference, and it was very, very possible. In the last couple of sessions, since Lieutenant Governor Jones got elected, bless his heart,
The election denier.
bless his heart,
The big elector.
indicted election denier, the House has been seen as the more moderate body. However, I have to mention, please allow me to, just 1 minute, the Speaker of the House, who we've been kind of praising here, 2 weeks ago appointed Janelle King, a MAGA Trump warrior, to the state election board. And the state election board, based on this appointment, now has 3 members majority of the state election board. Democrats in the House have been doing a lot on this issue. I've been working on it personally because I'm on the Government Affairs Committee, and we have asked, all of these letters are in the public realm right now. They're on my Facebook, will be on my Facebook, and my newsletter. If you don't take my newsletter, please sign up for it. We're asking Speaker Burns to rescind, suspend this appointment. The disaster that the state election board is causing intentionally to carry the flag of Donald Trump is very, very distressing. It's 76 days before a critical election.
So one more topic for these ladies, and then we're gonna ask you all what your questions are, so get ready for that. Earlier tonight, I talked about how Project 2025 takes aim at workers and at unions, and we definitely saw that this year, this session, with Senate Bill 362, which made it harder for workers to form unions in certain companies. Can you tell us about that, Representative Moore?
It passed, and it was a surprise, another surprising victory. It changes the rules and atmosphere about union participation will be allowed. We've had anti-union bills every single year when the Democrats were in charge, Trump was in charge. We have a less strong union presence in Georgia today, and we've got people who are rabid against unions. In terms of the 2025 agenda, there is no doubt, I spoke about a world of uncertainty, but I'm not uncertain about this. There is no doubt that the Republican leadership of Georgia wants to reduce regulations, reduce unions, and have greater freedom for their pollution of the environment. I am totally certain that those principles of 2025 are something they're committed to.
Do you have anything to add to that?
I just want to say that while this is all very scary, I don't want you to feel like totally terrified. The word emotion has the word motion in it. So if you're feeling angry, do something about it. Get moving. We are on the right side of history. We have the answers to all these issues. We have the solutions. And so as we go out and we talk to people, yes, it's important to know this stuff because we need to motivate people to work, but take it another step and be joyful. Because, like I said, we're on the right side of this, and elect us, and all this goes away.
why we wanted to do this program. We're going to tell you a little bit later exactly how you can get involved and how you can make this all go away. And it really is as simple as getting folks out to vote and voting for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. So what questions do you all have? While Steve is walking to some hands that are in the air, I'm going to start with a question from the internet, from our online viewers. And I'm going to ask Senator Harrell because I know she did an Instagram video on this. Is there a way for the people of Georgia to petition for the right of abortion on ballots just like other states have done?
We do not have a system to petition. The only way to get that done is to pass a referendum through the legislature, and that takes 2/3 of a vote from both chambers. And so we wouldn't be able to get those votes in our current situation, which is why we need to keep flipping seats.
Steve, what questions do we have out in the audience?
We've got one here.
Yes, hi, I'd just like to know on DeKalbDems.com, do you have resources for those that want to go out and campaign, those that want to knock on doors, or just people to be able to share on our Facebook pages, etc.?
We absolutely do. So when you go to DeKalbDems.com, just click on the events tab at the top of the page, and it will list all of the events that are happening with the Walz-Harris campaign. You've got canvassing, you've got phone banking, you've got postcard writing, and Claire's going to talk about that in a little bit. But yes, you can find that on our website.
Another audience question.
Hello, thank you for your information tonight. Are there any written instructions on how they plan to transition to some of these extreme things? I mean, how do you eliminate the VA and eliminate the Department of Education? I don't see it.
Yeah.
That's a good goal.
I don't know if the playbook is as detailed as that. I think with the Trump administration, we don't know how things are going to come to be, and probably not, maybe not all of it will come to be. But we know that, part of the plan is to train loyalists who don't care much about what the Constitution says. They want to replace all the civil servants, the nonpartisan civil servants, with these loyalists so that there aren't people like there were in the first Trump administration to say, no, you can't do that, that's against the law. So we don't know what's going to happen, but we don't really want to find out.
As we painfully remember, Donald Trump wasn't supposed to win that election. He wasn't supposed to win. Hillary Clinton was supposed to win, and that was our bad that we kind of counted on that in different ways. Now, things like the Heritage Foundation are ready. It is a very close election, and they are ready to fill the plugs that Donald Trump wasn't able to fill, basically based on incompetence, but also it was based on the fact that when he became president, the president of Exxon, the Goldman Sachs senior economic people, a lot of generals, there were some reasonable people who were put in place, all of whom quit in one way or another. You can go that, step by step, but this time, those people aren't going to step into the White House door with Donald Trump. They saw what happened. And so who is going to staff critical positions in the White House should Donald Trump win? They're going to have a freer opportunity, and the Project 2025 is about preparing to implement that opportunity.
I can give you another inspiring tidbit because it seems like some of you kind of want to know what you can do. And so I'm going to tell you a story about my mom. My mom has always been a Republican, but she now says the Republican Party left her. She walked in 2016 and voted for Hillary Clinton. She sent me a text yesterday, and she said, I think I just talked, insert neighbor's name, into deserting Trump. She said how she did this was she quoted Judge Ludwig, who gave an impassioned speech at the conclusion of the January 6th investigation. She says Ludwig is a conservative and is working with the American Bar Association to get the word out. And she says, and you can repeat to people you know, it isn't the leader, it isn't the party, it isn't the policy, it's the preservation of our system of government. And that is how she talked her neighbor into abandoning his vote for Trump.
Judge Ludwig just endorsed Kamala Harris, by the way. That was a big thing. Any other questions, Steve, out there?
Yes, in our live audience, we have a question from Mark.
My question is, with all the new rules being issued by the state election board, why didn't we have a sense, election 76 days away, how these new rules may play out in an unfavorable way?
I think that that lawsuit is being drafted that's going to ask a judge to enjoin implementations of this rule because of the impracticality and the chaos, the practicality of implementing these kind of rules and the chaos that will come. Both, this is interesting to me, both Secretary of State Raffensperger and Attorney General Chris Carr in the last 24 hours have come out and said these rules are a bad idea. So there is a break in the Republican leadership, as there has been, as we know, on the ridiculousness of the MAGA efforts. I have to have faith. I tell clients all the time, real world clients, you can trust the system. It's going to find a reasonable path. Now, in the political world, that's tougher for me to convey that, but I just don't see any of the judges that I know allowing these rules to go forward. So that's my hope for that.
Steve, do we have time for any more questions?
We'll have one final question from the in-person audience. This is John.
Hello, thank you so much for your attention to these important matters. I'm curious about what you would say about the likelihood that the current Supreme Court will seize the opportunity to interpret the Comstock Act and shut down Mifo-Cristo, even if Kamala Harris wins. Thank you.
Any idea? I'm very, very hesitant to predict on that. And if Mary Margaret Oliver is hesitant to predict, I'm not even going to try.
We just don't know what's going to happen. And the Supreme Court has done things that none of us thought they would ever do. And so we have to take this seriously. And that's why we want to bring this kind of information to you all and motivate you to make it all go away. So thank you all so much. Thank you for our panelists for talking about what's already happening in Georgia. Thank you for fighting against these policies that we
Mic drop.
That's an actual mic drop right there. We're going to move on to our next portion of our program, and I am pleased to bring up a student from Emory University just down the road, and we've got Josh Horvath. Say that again. Travis? Please come up here. We asked Josh to give us his perspective about Project 2025 as somebody, a member of the younger generation. What does it mean to him? What does it mean to his family? What does it mean to his generation?
Hey y'all, my name is Joshua Kravik. I'm a senior at Emory and the treasurer of the Young Democrats of Emory. I believe people who support Trump in my age group are fueled by a sense of cynicism and apathy towards our government and its institutions. I know this partially because I supported Trump in 2016, but you can't blame me so much because I was 15. But he fed into like a skepticism I had towards the government. But when he won, I realized that the drive to change our institutions was in his own self-interest. I mean, there's no greater example of this when he tried to subvert our election in 2021. But there's still people my age that do support him. And they still have this drive of skepticism of stuff like the deep state. At this point, Trump has been in the forefront of our politics for most of my politically conscious life. Speech after speech, interview after interview, his rhetoric has been constantly in the news during my developmental years, coloring the outlook of people my age to make everything appear vaguely corrupt or conspiratorial. Now, Project 2025 will use this rhetoric to fundamentally change our government. By continuing to stoke the flames of cynicism and apathy, they will try to consolidate all of our bureaucracies under the executive branch. In Project 2025, they outline eliminating the Department of Education, denying the existence of climate change, and limiting our democracy. Nothing that my generation is for, but they will try to convince them to support it by making vague notions to people in the underbelly of the government, trying to go against its people. In Project 2025, they plan to replace any government worker who goes against Trump's unconstitutional actions with loyalists. This will fundamentally change the fabric of our democracy for my generation and generations to come. And it will be, as it has been for years, an effort to turn us against our own government, its processes, and its checks and balances. But, I mean, on a positive note, there's been a tide change. With Kamala Harris, we've seen a substantial shift in the attitude of my generation. If we focus on the fact that there is a presidential candidate giving voice to the concerns of people my age, that of climate change, affordable housing, and a future where we can rely on our system, we can shift the tide and make people who are cynical into optimistic. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, John. Now, do we have a Q&A now, or we're going to Claire? Okay, we got one more speaker for you, and she may be last, but she is certainly not least, because she is going to help us all figure out how do we move forward from here. How do we talk about this with our friends and family? Claire Scheck-Steiner, and Claire, you can come on up, is our organizing director for the Harris Walz campaign. She is in charge of all of the campaign activities in DeKalb County. She's been a DeKalb Democrat for many, many years. We all know her, we all love her, and we love working with her. And Claire, I have to tell a little story before I hand the mic over to you. So my mother texted me, speaking of texts from our mothers, a couple of days ago, and I was telling her about how I was gonna give this presentation, how I was preparing for it, and how it was about Project 2025 and how to talk about Project 2025. And she said, you know, I would be really hesitant to bring this up with my friends, because all I want to do is yell at them and say, don't you care about our democracy? What are you, stupid? And I thought, that's probably not the right way to go. And I told her about the approach that Claire has been teaching all of us about what's the best way to talk with our friends and family. She talks about how to engage folks in conversation and listening being a key component. So I explained that to my mom. We'll see if she uses it. So I'm going to hand it over to Claire to tell you all what I told my mom. Democrats. So glad to see you all tonight. Gosh, that's a whole lot about Project 2025, isn't it? It is, just it racks me, it racks my soul that we're sitting here today talking about this. Ooh, where do I need to look?
Center.
Right there, center. Okay,
Camera's here.
center. And I tell people who come into the campaign office we have a training on Project 2025. I'm like, you live in Georgia. We have Project 2025 already. You know what it's like to live with it. You can tell other people about it because truly, under Kemp and Burt Jones and other Republicans, and even prior to Burt Jones, we've lost so many rights here in this state. And so what's going on, we are a laboratory for what can work in other places. And when Republicans have all control over all the levels of government, this is what we get. We've lost, think about it. Think about all the rights that we've lost, right? So we do have to vote. We have to get our friends to vote. The Democrats have to understand that we have to win to have power. We can't divide ourselves. We have to do the work. There are so many people who don't know who Kamala Harris is. So it's really, really important to talk to everybody you know about how you're feeling about this election. And then, as Amy said, to stop and listen and ask people how they're feeling and how they feel about the election, and stop talking and actively listen. And it is amazing when you do that, people will tell you. And then you have some idea of what they might be feeling undecided about or uncomfortable with, and you can ask if they know about Project 2025. And then listen some more. And it's really interesting, when you listen to somebody, they'll listen to you. And when you speak calmly and with facts, and you're not trying to tell them what to think, but just asking them what they think, it's amazing. And it really was, I think it was developed by Quentin Fulks, who ran the Warnock campaign and is now the deputy manager or head of the campaign for Biden and now Harris. Came up with that idea of just saying, let's not make it go louder, right? And it has really, really worked. I've had so many conversations across this county and on the phone, and in the grocery store, and at the post office. So just keep talking and listening and getting involved. I really want to know what you're going to do every day. Early voting starts in 55 days, you guys. 55 days, and voter registration ends on October 7th. So I need to know what you're going to do every day to help Kamala Harris and Tim Walz get elected. And I do have to tell you some joyful stories that there are people walking into our office every day, who say, I have never supported a political candidate, I haven't ever voted, and I never made a donation, but I want you to sign me up for every shift. It is just, it's amazing. And it happens again and again. People who come and spend their days off with us. And so we are cutting turf and asking neighbors to knock neighbors' doors, get a group together, come to us, and if you're a block captain or a precinct captain or a house district chair with DeKalb Downs, we need to cut the turf. We need to show you where to go. You know where to go, but if we cut it, then national counts it. So that's really important. We're going to knock every door in DeKalb County and across the state 3 times between now and election day. That's a lot of door knocking. But that means that we're going to have these conversations, and we're going to listen to people, and we're going to bring them in. And when you're listening and they're excited, get excited, share it. It's so much fun, and it's so much hope. And I know you guys have been watching the convention. So fantastic. So just keep
keep involved, and please, please, I've got sign-up sheets in the back so that you can sign up and plug in to Phone Bank. We've had 10,000 people express interest in joining the campaign after the Kamala Harris rally. And we need to be able to get in touch with them. We need you to phone bank, so it's calling friendlies. But, and ask them to plug in and then knocking doors with us. And it really does work. Showing up and knocking doors, it really does work. So I hope you'll join us, and I'm here to answer all questions, and I'm there 6 days a week. Go ahead.
I just wondered how would you leverage social media to do this?
We have engagement organizers, and we are absolutely online doing trainings constantly, and we are engaging. Every time anybody comes into the office, we're asking them to download Reach, which gives you an opportunity to see all sorts of information that the Walz and Harris campaign are sharing, and you can share it in your community. And there's good messaging, fact-based messaging that you can share. And then when you come to the office, or when you canvass, or when you make a phone call, post about it, share. Let's have some hope scrolling instead of doom scrolling. Don't be afraid to share how hopeful you feel. But the federal government, if we elect Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, we will be able to stop Project 2025 at a federal level. But we have so much work to do in this state. It's going to take a miracle to flip the House if we were able to do it this cycle. But we need to build a human infrastructure so that we can win in 26 and re-elect Jon Ossoff and whoever runs for governor. So we tell everybody that comes in our doors to join the CAB Democrats, because a strong Democratic Party is the way to fix Georgia.
Thank you so much. I love that approach of asking people how they feel as a starter, right? Instead of launching into all the things you want to tell people, ask them how they feel about things. And that leads you into a dialogue. So thank you, Claire, for that approach. I love that approach. Thank you for all the resources. Claire will be available for you after this program so that she can answer questions. Take down your email if you're interested in helping out. Like I said earlier, if you want to find all of the opportunities to get involved, just go to decabdems.com and click on events, and we will have you covered. So thank you. And Steve, what's next? Oh, sorry. I'm going to bring Brandy, our chair, back up here.
Awesome. Guys, big round of applause for everyone that was up here this evening. I hope that you all found this both informative as well as an opportunity for you to start to get involved and find a way for you to help protect our democracy. I first off want to thank our elected officials, Representative Oliver and Senator Harrell. Thank you guys so much for being here. These are two elected officials we know we can always call on, and they have so much knowledge and such great answers, and we're really grateful for them being here tonight. I also want to say thank you to Josh Kravitz, who is our political activist and treasurer for Emory Young Democrats. Lastly, I want to say thank you to Claire Snyder for being here. For being here this evening. Claire is basically, I wouldn't say single-handedly, but she's got a fantastic team as well, supporting all of the Harris Walz campaign efforts here in DeKalb. And then and I also want to say a huge thank you and job well done to our first vice chair, Amy Swigert. As Amy shared, Amy has done a lot of research here for this evening's event. I know that there's been a lot of talk about Project 2025, and Amy has dug really deep to better understand what information to be able to share with you all. And as Senator Harrell said, this is not about making us scared, but about helping us to know what's actually happening, what is actually on the agenda of radical Republicans, and helping us to know that we actually have a stake in this and we can actually make a difference. So thank you so much, Amy, for everything that you shared. And then one last thing I also want to thank our events team, led by Steve Parker. I'm going to name out some folks here as well. Steve Parker, Paula Anderson, Amy Farrow, Bill Gundry, Lawrence Nathaniel, and the entire events team. Guys, we do not do any of this without this team. They did so much. And then also Lisa Milko of the Chapel of Sycamore for having us here this evening, and William Tusick, and also the Decatur First United Methodist Church as well. So thank you all. Thank you. All right, as we shared, everyone, the purpose of coming here tonight is to make sure that you understand how you can get involved, how you can make a difference. Guys, because on November 5th, it is a determination of whether we continue to have the democracy that we see today, or whether it turns into what you just saw on that screen. So,
Of the address of the field office.
I will give you that in just, I think I got that here. If I don't, Claire has it, but I'm going to share that in just a second. I also want to talk a little bit about how you can get involved. Claire shared a little bit about this, but we've got a number of events that are coming up. So tomorrow, if you have not been paying attention to the Democratic National Convention, I would say pay attention. Y'all, this is on fire. And it is one of the first national conventions that everybody is super excited for. Please pay attention. Please take a look at what's happening. We're also going to have in-person watch nights for Kamala Harris actually accepting the Democratic nomination. We're going to have 3 of those on the north side of DeKalb in Hobnob and Brookhaven, in central DeKalb at Wild Haven Beer Tap Room in Avondale Estates, and then in South DeKalb at a live church in Stonecrest. So you can actually go to our DeKalb website and sign up for one of those. We also have our monthly business meeting that happens typically on the first Thursday night of each month. Coming up in September, we are actually going to have that on the second Thursday, which is on September 12th, and that is actually going to be at the 2024 Victory Office, and the address is
627 East College Avenue.
627 East College Avenue in Decatur. Excellent, awesome. And then lastly, just for awareness, here at DeKalb Dems, we don't only focus on the national elections, we also focus on our local elections. So we are going to be having our candidates for county commissioner for districts 3 and 7, a forum that is going to be happening on September 25th. So you can also find that on our website as well. And one last thing, guys, I have to ask because I wouldn't be the chair of DeKalb Democrats if I didn't. All the work that is happening here this evening, it is happening because of dedicated volunteers. And it is happening with people who are giving their blood, sweat, and tears on a daily basis. And even though we get a lot of volunteer hours, we also need donations to be able to make sure that we are able to drive forward. Our whole purpose here at DeKalb Dems is to make sure that we are getting people out to vote in November and beyond. And so any donation that you can give us, we would be super grateful. You can find our donation link on the DeKalb Dems website as well. Any other questions? Okay, we got a couple. Go ahead.
Will these slides be available online?
We can post those on the website. Amy?
Our technology co-chair. She's nodding. So yes, we'll make these available. And also, if you want to give us your email address, I'm happy to email it to anybody who's interested.
And you can actually sign up your information on the DeKalb Dems website, and we'll reach out to you as well. I saw one other hand here, Mary.
Have have you gotten in the updated, signs, et cetera?
Claire?
Yes, we will have signs, 1,000 delivered tomorrow. At 227 East College Avenue, so the shoot in the morning, I'm gonna keep that, hopefully on that sign now.
Any other, flyers, hats, shirts, all that?
We'll see.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, for our online audience, the question was, are there signs or other swag that is at the office at 627 East College Avenue? Those are coming, and the new batch is coming in tomorrow, so if you're interested, please stop by and pick up a yard sign, a Harris Waltz website, and potentially some other swag. All right, I saw a couple other hands, go ahead.
I did postcards this last weekend, and I wanted to think, and I was wondering, like, what areas do you go to, and like, do they make a big difference?
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
Postcards, I went to a event where we, did postcards, and I was wondering, how much of a difference do postcards make, and what do you know what people think about when they think?
We've had an overwhelming number of postcards written. We had written, I think, 200,000, and because the CAB is doing so many, now they are in coordinated offices across the state, and they ordered 125,000 more. I thought that it was coming to an end. Supposedly, it helps move the rate by 1.9%, which is a lot, I mean, and I've gotten a card in the past, and I definitely put it on my refrigerator. It's really nice, I mean, if somebody is thinking about you and wants you to vote, and the Democratic Party will send out thousands of postcards across the state starting September 1st, and will be focused on new voters and low turnout voters. So I think it's a really nice thing, and it's been such a nice, all sorts of people, all ages, everybody sitting together at tables, writing these postcards.
But how about door knocking? Like, that has not affected me. How effective is that?
It actually really can be, and I think that the most effective it is when neighbors knock on neighbors' doors. And when you go to an adjacent neighborhood and say, I'm Kathy, and I live, if you go up the way and take a left at the McDonald's, I'm 4 blocks down, but I came over here because I want to talk to you and make sure that you have the voting information that you need, that we're checking your voter registration, and that if you have any questions, you can find me. And sure enough, somebody's going to go, that lady that came around, on next door, they'll say, I have a question about an absentee ballot. Could you help me? And boom, you're going to see that, and you'll respond, or somebody will know who you were. And we're creating community, we're talking to each other, we're looking out for each other. It's what makes the world go round, and it really, really does work.
Yeah. So one thing that I'll add to that as well, if you're not familiar with how DeKalb Dems work, we actually have a number of on-the-ground folks, to Claire's point, where we actually get folks to talk to their neighbors. So we have block captains, we have precinct captains, and their whole goal is to talk to people that are in their particular area about the issues that are affecting their particular area. And it's a great way to make sure that people are talking to each other and actually getting people out to vote. So it's not some stranger knocking on your door, but somebody that, to Claire's point, lives down the street. So you can get involved by going to our website, signing up. So, all right, any other questions?
One more.
Okay, I see it. Coming with the microphone. Being told that that's the last one after this. Okay.
Sorry, I had a question regarding postcards. So I picked some up at the office, and I was wondering if there are any online resources for ideas of what to write, or anything like that on the website.
Okay, so
Go to Georgia Postcard Project.
okay, GeorgiaPostcardProject.com, and so there's some language there as well, and then all of our volunteering activities as well allows us to, and Facebook, our Facebook page as well. But all of our volunteering activities as well, people like work together to figure out like what to write, so. Awesome. All right, guys, if that is it, thank you all so much for being here this evening. We are so grateful for you all here in the room as well as online. And again, our website is decabgems.com. Please make sure you are making your mark on history both between now and November 5th, as well as on Election Day. Have a good night.